Welcome to this episode of Optimal Game State. In this video, we're looking at the Death Bladeborn Warbands. Those are the Underworld models that also have rules for Warcry. In an earlier video, I looked at the rules on how to use these fighters in your Warcry warband, so if you want to know more about that, check that video. You can find the rules for most of these warbands in the Tome of Champions 2021, with a few released in White Dwarf since. We're going to start with the Grymwatch. This is the entourage of the noble duke as he sets out on a quest to hunt noble steeds. At least that's what these ghouls think is happening in their insane deluded minds. This is a pretty big warband with 7 fighters in total. The leader is Duke Crackmarrow, a variant on the Aberrant Ghoul King. He's 20 points cheaper, has 2 extra wounds, 1 extra toughness, and reach, only losing the Berserk rune mark and the associated abilities. That's really good value. Most of the remaining fighters end up getting compared to the Crypt Ghoul, as the Flesh Eater courts don't have a great range of cheap fighters. Just a ghoul with the next cheapest non-hero at 185 points. So these new fighters add some well-needed range, even if the ghoul does end up winning out a lot of the time. For Valric, you pay 5 more and get 2 extra wounds with +1 crit, but lose an attack. That's 2 average damage for the ghoul, dropping to 1.67 with Valric. Knight's Herald is probably a little better, costing 10 more and keeping the attack profile along with +2 wounds. The real advantage here is that the Duke can use his ability for it, but again, we're only looking at an average 2 damage attack, so maybe not that good. The Royal Butcher and Master Talon up the cost again, 15 to 20 extra. Despite looking better, the Butcher loses that dice, keeping the average of 2 damage, while Master Talon ups it slightly to 2.67. Then we have Gristlewell, an extra 25 points and still only 2.67 damage. All these ghouls are a little bit of a letdown. I think I'd still take the Duke, just without his ghouls, so he never gets to use that ability. The last fighter is the Duke's Harriers. These are similar in ways to the Fellback Troll, but obviously don't take up a troll slot. They do have the Beast trait, which means they can carry treasure. They're almost half the price of the Fellback though. Just a 20 more points than a ghoul, and you're getting fly, move 10, and 1 extra attack, although with -1 toughness. That's a pretty nice option to have, and a Flesh Eater court can take one as a normal fighter. The Duke himself is decent value, so you could look at the Duke and the Harriers as a pair for any Death Warband at 215 points total. Thorns of the Briar Queen. This warband came in the Night Vault box and was released when Night Haunts were everywhere. All Night Haunts are flyers, and they have to pay for that. This box has the Queen herself, a Banshee, 2 unique enough models in the form of Varklev and the Everhanged, along with 4 Chain Rasp variants. The Briar Queen is similar to a Tomb Banshee, but costs 25 points more. For that you gain 4 wounds and 1 toughness, but lose 1 wound, the Destroy rune mark, 1 dice from a melee attack, 2 range, and 1 strength from a ranged attack. So it's mostly a downgrade. Her ability is quite interesting. It's a triple based on the dice value, so that's pretty unreliable. The effect essentially, on average per dice, does 1.5 damage and reduces the move of the target by 0.5 until the end of the round. It's a very interesting ability, but probably not worth the increased cost and the damage drop. Varklev is 10 more points than a Velmorn Banshee, but with 6 more wounds, 1 less move, and 1 less strength. The Everhanged costs 5 more than a Bladegeist Revenant, but has no upside, losing a point of move and a point of strength. The Thorns Chain Rasps are an upgrade. They're very similar to the normal version, but the extra 1 damage on a crit pushes the average damage from 1.5 to 2. Now, you are losing a point of move, but that might actually be worth it. That said, Chain Rasps don't see a lot of play. Compared to the Crypt Ghoul, the Thorn Chain Rasps are paying 40 extra points for 1 toughness and fly. Kainan's Reapers. These are the Ossiarch Bone Reapers. Rather than simply reanimating skeletons, the Bone Reapers use bone as a material to make the perfect vessels. Mere Kainan, at 230 points, is pretty expensive, but he's also fast with 5 move and hardy with 26 wounds. His weapon profile best compares to the Mortisian Soul Reaper. Kainan is 80 more points expensive, but does have +1 crit and +1 strength on his melee. The ranged attack profile is the same, but that was mostly backup anyway, with the real work coming from his scythe, with an average of 5.5 damage compared to the 3 of the ranged attack. Interestingly, this does mean he may be better at attacking with his ranged weapon twice, rather than move and attacking just once. Without the Terrifying rune mark, he loses the quad but gains his own. Increasing his strength isn't great, as it's already 5 on the melee, although you could boost the ranged. The extra attack dice is big though, as he's only rolling 3 dice in melee, and 2 for the range, so the impact of an extra dice is quite big. He is very expensive, but I have to admit I like him. He's a nice new option for the Aussie Orcs, even if he doesn't necessarily compete outside of that warband. Binar Kentra is similar to an Immortus Guard. He costs 20 points less, losing 1 move, 6 wounds, and a damage drops from 4.6 to 4. Now, unfortunately I think that drop to move 3 is probably his downfall, otherwise he would make a nice budget option. The Mortek Guard with Shield is the foot soldier of the Aussie Orc Bone Reapers. Senna is 20 points more, but only gets 2 extra wounds, so that's not great. Karu has a different weapon profile, but it ends up with the same average damage of 2, so again, it's just an extra 2 wounds for 25 more points. Harkor is a Mortek Guard with Crit Blade. He's nearly double the price, but the damage goes from 2.6 to 4.5. He's actually super efficient damage per points fighter, but within the Bone Reapers, he's beaten out by his Mortek Guard equivalent, who you can take 2 of for just slightly more. Nohem is similar in that he doesn't provide great value, but he does have a range attack, and that isn't something that was available before. It's a shame that it's only 2 damage on average, but it is an extra option. Moving on, the Crimson Court. 4 vampires. All of them with very cool double the Trill of the Hunt that adds 1 to attacks and strength if the target is already wounded. Unfortunately, it's only for the next attack, but it is a nice alternative to Onslaught if you're moving an attack. Prince Duval is a vampire lord, but for 20 points less, and losing the Fly rune mark. He gets 1 more wound, but loses 1 toughness. He has all the same rune marks, so he can use Thirst for Blood. It's a triple that, after you kill a target, lets you heal double the dice value. Actually really good value. He also gets access to the Crimson Court abilities, including his unique Fiendish Lure, which increases the crit damage against nearby enemies. Even as an aura effect for a double, the benefit is so tiny that it's unlikely to ever be worth it. I really like him as an option. The Fly is a nice perk, but with 5 move, much of the time you won't need to use it, so the Prince is pretty good value. Velas Fontaine is like a Zirkos Bloodborne, but she's 15 points cheaper. She loses 3 move, but gains 1 wound and 1 toughness. The Agile rune mark on the Bloodborne is used for a double that lets him climb, so losing it isn't that big of a deal. And the Terrifying rune mark instead opens up that Thirst for Blood triple, which has a nice heal option. Gorath is a Vagskir, but 35 points cheaper. He loses 1 move, 1 strength, and a massive 14 wounds. But he does make up for that as a great budget option. It's still decent damage with an average of 4, and as he has only 2 attack dice, he gets a lot of value from Onslaught or Trill of the Hunt abilities. Last we have Anais, who is somewhere in between a Felbat and a Vargeist. The Felbat is 3 damage, Anais is 3.3 damage, with the Vargeist at 4 average damage versus T4. Anais is the cheapest and slowest, but also sits midway when it comes to total wounds. I like him a lot. He's a fast flyer with good health for reasonable points. Overall, very nice options. Essentially all variations on the classic Vampire Lord, giving a nice range for a vampire-themed warband. Staying in the Soulblight Gravelords, we have the Sepulchral Guard. These are all skeletons and present some cheap options. Remember, all these are available to a Soulblight Gravelords list, while any Death Warband needs to take the Warden if they want access to the remaining fighters. The Sepulchral Warden is the equivalent of a Seneschal, but a little chunkier. He costs 20 more points and has an extra 3 wounds. His damage of 3.5 is significantly lower than the 5 of the Seneschal. That's due to the strength of 5, which is a sweet spot versus toughness 4. The Warden does have a reach of 2 though, which is nice. Like all in his warband, the Warden has a triple that gets a bonus move, which is nice, but overall I think I'd favour the Seneschal in most cases. The Prince of Dust and the Champion are not heroes, but are still similar to the Seneschal. Both have an average damage of 4. The Champion is actually a significant discount when compared to Seneschal. He's closer maybe to a Graveguard with White Blade, who is the most efficient fighter when it comes to damage in the game. The Champion is 10 points more, but 1 point damage less. He is harder to kill with those 4 extra wounds though. Unfortunately, he lacks the Minion rune mark, which means Champions cannot be resurrected again. Similarly, these guys do not have the Minion trait. They all have increased points from minor upgrades, and unfortunately those are not great options. If you do happen to have the points spare and are okay with having a few models you can't resurrect, these might see a place, but overall, not a great deal. Next up, the Exiled Dead. This is a necromancer with some of his creations. Marvok is referred to as Prentice Marvok, so presumably that's a necromancer in training. Dentalas is a quite interesting fighter. At 210, that's a whole extra 65 points, almost 50% beyond the price increase of a necromancer. Toughness is increased by 1, and we do have the typical health increase, this time an extra 5. Where there is a significant difference is in the damage. The melee moves from 3 to 5.3, while the range attack moves from 3 to 5. So this is a pretty nice upgrade. Range attacks are pretty rare to get your hands on, and this is up there as one of the top ones. If there's a target with toughness 4 in range, Dentalas can take 2 actions to roll 4 dice, with each roll of 3 to 5 doing 3 damage, and any 6s doing 6 damage. That is crazy good. Along with Dentalas are his creations, basically electrified zombies. They cost 20 points more than a normal zombie. That's a big 50% extra on the standard 40, but you do get an extra dice on the attack and an extra point of movement, which is pretty big. The 70 point option ups the strength by 1, but I'm not really sure that's worth it. A normal zombie will do 1.6 damage on average. That extra attack brings the Exiled Dead zombies to 2.5, which is a nice upgrade. Coil takes it all the way up to 3 average damage, so nearly double the cost of a normal zombie, but with a similar increase in damage. Now, the zombies weren't necessarily the go-to choice for Gravelords. For a long time it's been Grave Guards with White Blades everywhere. Those are 5 damage for 65 points, so well out ahead. These guys are moved forward though, and if you have them together in a clump, then that double Crackling Aura could do some numbers. Last up we have Regulus and Prentice Markov. These do not have the rune marks for Crackling Aura. Regulus is 5 points more than a skeleton and just gets 2 wounds out of it. Prentice is decent for his points. He's only damage 2 but speed 4 and 15 wounds is good value. His ability is a combo with Regulus. For a double you can activate Markov and then immediately activate Regulus. That's kind of like the universal ability Inspiring Presence. But then you normally activate your scary leader and follow up with an equally scary fighter, and this is not that. These are both chaff figures, and doubling the map is probably a bad idea. So these last two I think weren't great, but this warband overall does have a lot to offer. Last, but definitely not least, we have the Sons of Velmorn. Again, another Soulblight Gravelords warband. We can already see some minion traits that don't have the FAQ elite rune mark, so this is something juicy. Let's start with King Velmorn himself. He's 5 more points than a White King, having exact same stats. Those 5 points do give you a unique triple ability that boosts the strength of the nearby Sons of Velmorn. They're already mostly 5, so that's not as big as it might first look. He does get all the same abilities as White King, so a double increases crit damage and a triple to summon dead minions back. Jedrun Falseborn is Velmorn's Seneschal. He's a chunky 50 points more with only a minor increase to his damage, with his crit increasing by 1. He is much harder to kill though, with toughness 5 and 30 wounds. That's important because he doesn't have the minion rune mark, and due to his double which stops King Velmorn from being targeted. If you're facing against the Sons, you can't kill the king, you don't want to kill the minions because they'll just be brought back, so you have to go through those 30 points of wounds at toughness 5. All bad choices. So even though he is quite expensive, I quite like him. Now for the main attraction. Velmorn's 3 other sons are comparable to the Graveguard. They aren't quite as insanely efficient as the Graveguard, but they're not that far off. The Graveguard does 5 average damage for 65 points. Thane does the same damage for 70. Falk is 4 damage for 65 points, while Helmar is 3.5 damage for 60. They also all have access to a double sibling rivalry that increases their attacks by 2 for the activation, rather than the usual 1 of Onslaught. You will need one of the others to attack first, but that's fine. The minion rune mark also opens up the Shambling Horde double, which lets them get a bonus move if they're close to another Soulblight's Gravelord hero. These are all fantastic numbers, and because they didn't get hit by the FAQ, they are really the new hotness. For the same cost as 3 Graveguard, you do get a reduction in damage, but you get to bring back your fighters at full health. So it's like having the Graveguards pre-FAQ. Alas, they can't fix the undead dragonids easily, but it is a start. Unsurprisingly, I like this warband a lot. Everyone in the warband is worth playing in Warcry, and they all have nice synergies together. There are 2 warbands missing Warcry rules. I doubt they'll ever get them, and no one will really care. These are Dreeper's Wraith Creepers and Lady Harrow's Mournflight. These were easy to build kits that they decided to release some Underworlds rules for, about a year or so after Motley had come out. For Warcry, these are just generic Glaive Wraith Stalkers and Murmorn Banshees, so they don't need any special rules. Alright, so a summary. There are a lot of warbands in here, and there were a few disappointments, often because the fighters they were compared to were just straight better. The Grymwatch had the Duke and the Harriers, but not much else. Mere Kainan himself was interesting, but the rest of his Reapers didn't really measure up. All of the vampires from the Crimson Court were cool, rules and models. So much so that I actually ordered a set while I was doing this review. The Exiled Dead had Tentalas the Exile as a real standout. His range attack is very impressive. His zombies are like the 28 Days Later zombies and are surprisingly fast, which might make for a nice option. They aren't doing as much damage as the Grave Guards, but they are minions without the elite trait, so they might be something there. Last but not least, the Sons of Velmorn. Velmorn and Jedrin are a great combo, while the rest of the Sons make a great side grade following the FAQ. So overall, really good for Death in general, and especially the Soulblight Gravelords. Alas, nothing for the Nighthaunts, who aren't doing so well at the moment, but as the leaders of most of these Bladeborn warbands have been good, the Soulblight can end up with a lot of extra choices there. If you're interested in running some of these models, make sure you check out the Warcry card creator, link in the notes. I've added a drop down at the bottom where you can load up the stats for a fighter. Not all the profiles are fully up to date, so you should double check with your sourcebooks, but it will speed up the process for making the fighter and ability cards. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Each week I put up a new video talking about one of Games Workshop's specialist games. The goal is always to try and make the best possible two-player experience. If this is something you'd find interesting, please subscribe to the channel and comment to let me know what you'd like to see in future.